inclinas así, y aquí en esa cámara te están mirando, pero tú lo vas a mirar hacia ellos también. Aquí. Hello, everybody. Welcome to round 60 of the WBC Talks. This time it's going to be clean boxing program. It's a really one of the most important programs in boxing. But first, let me introduce 𝗧𝗔𝗟 𝗪𝗪𝗧. She's the director of the WBC University. 𝗧𝗔𝗟, good afternoon.
Good afternoon now. Hi, Victor, Mauricio, Dr. Goodman, Jose, everybody. Well, round 60, we are in the middle of the week. And as usual, I'm going to start with a small reflection, trying to share a mental training capsule that will help us go through confinement. Today, we are going to make a reflection based on the following question. Remember that the subject that we share in this capsule are in the context of confinement. The question is, are athletes aware of what they think and feel when they compete? The question refers to the self-knowledge they have and sometimes if what they think of themselves. It is true or is not. Confinement has created uncertainty for them and also for us. And we are seeing in athletes at the moment that they have been acting in two ways. One way is with a negative vision, and is when they feel threat, they feel fear, nervous, anxiety, and at the end they have a block of a state. And with positive vision, they see competition as a challenge, curiosity, ambition, activation, and they are guiding to enjoyment. But in both cases, it generates learning for them. Confinement, it has been like an invisible training that has generated opportunity first to reflect on their own way of training or competing and to strengthen their skills. They can be mental, physically, technical, and tactical skills. Now, this is a question for athletes also. What is your self-dialogue when you train or compete? Remember that the mind believes everything you say to your mind. In this time of confinement, we are facing confrontation between what I should and what I want. And in this time, it is important that we do a self-analysis. Who am I? What do I have to do? What do I decide to do? And how do I feel? You have to keep asking these questions to yourself. An important recommendation that will lead athletes to a good decision-making is to always remember that they have to listen to their body, okay? Don't demand more from their body, okay? Life is not what happens to you, but life is the interpretation you make of what happens to you. Okay, with this small reflection, I say hello again to everybody, and I'm very eager to enjoy this panel with all the experts here. Thank you, Mauricio, Victor, and Dr. Goodman.
Thank you, 𝗧𝗔𝗟. And now let me introduce Mauricio Sulaimán. He's the president of the World Boxing Council. Mauricio.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, 𝗧𝗔𝗟. It's a real pleasure to have one of my personal heroes, Dr. Goodman, to have Dr. Eichner here with us, Alberto León, and our proud WBC super middleweight champion, David Benavidez, Bandera Roja. This is a very special round of the WBC Talks, round number 60, and it's going to be dedicated for the clean boxing program. And I just cannot wait to get going into these great experts that has been the pride of the WBC. The clean boxing program has been a great one. We have had great results, a few headaches, a few very difficult situations, but very gratifying examples. And we can certainly pride ourselves to have changed many lives, like David Benavidez, our proud champion. So welcome. I'm very excited, and thank you very much for your participation in today's WBC Talks.
Excited to be here.
Thank you, Mauricio.
And also with us, Alberto Leon. He's Vice President WBC2. Alberto, how are you?
I'm doing well, Victor. How are you?
Hey,
Everything
Alberto.
is good.
Hello, everyone.
The first thing that I would like to ask Mauricio or Dr. Goodman, can you explain what is...
Victor,
Yes, go ahead.
I would like to introduce properly Dr. Goodman and Dr. Eichner.
Okay.
I think, of course, we know them directly, but I would like to welcome Dr. Goodman and Dr. Eichner. And if you can tell us a little bit of your background related in boxing, in sports, and in anti-doping world, that would be very good. So ladies first, Dr. Goodman.
Well, for those of the individuals that don't know me for so many years, unfortunately, I started in boxing in 1994. I was a ringside physician initially for the amateurs, and then started with the Nevada Athletic Commission. Eventually, as time went on, I became the chief ringside physician for Nevada and was appointed by the governor as head of the medical advisory board. And there we made various recommendations on fighter health and safety, determined licensure, and also in anti-doping. When I left the commission in 2007, I realized that most athletic commissions had very little to do with anti-doping. It was very low on the totem pole. And actually what I did was even eventually reach out to Mauricio, and Mauricio and I spoke, and it was something that was a favorite of your father's, Mauricio. If you remember, Don Jose was very, very big proponent in anti-doping. And through our work together with the World Boxing Council, with VADA, the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association that I started in late 2011, we have worked together. Now we've tested over almost 1,000 fighters through the World Boxing Council's Clean Boxing program. And I think in anything that this has done is it really has brought anti-doping to the forefront and the need for further testing and education of the athletes in boxing. It's been an incredible endeavor. No one has even come close to doing this. So you should be very, very proud. And I'm so happy to work with the WBC.
Well, we're very happy to have the champion with us. You are an unbelievable asset to the sport, to clean boxing. Your work as a ringside physician for many years was spectacular, fundamental. You have always been there to help in any situation. You helped us to create the awareness pamphlet that we still give out every single fight for identifying post-fight trauma to the brain. That is given to the family, to the cornerman, and to the fighters so they can see the symptoms, because nobody knows when there's a concussion what is going to happen. So the key is to identify it and then address it immediately. So welcome, Dr. Goodman. Thank you so much. Your work for boxing has been loable and one of the greatest personalities in the sport. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Eichner, welcome.
Mauricio, good to see you again. I had the pleasure of doing some work with you and Alberto in Birmingham, Alabama a few years ago. So great to see you guys again. I got very big shoes to fill after Margaret's introduction. I have done nothing nearly as much as that. However, my daughter has ridden her horse and she did a very good job, but that's my claim to fame. But we run a lab. We're actually the largest anti-doping lab in the world. And our goal is to really make it, you know, sports fair, but also to make the collections easy. And so, you know, one of the things that we've been pushing really hard and working with Margaret on as well is the dried blood spots. Nobody likes needles, so we try to do a lot of innovative research to make it easier for the athletes to go through their program. And, you know, we couldn't be prouder to partner with, you know, VADA and the WBC with their program. You guys have run a world-class program. There's a lot of the combat federations out there that don't take anti-doping serious, and no one could ever argue the investment and the effort you guys have put in. You guys have, you know, you really take this seriously. And so it's a great privilege for us to partner with you on these things. We're in unusual times right now. People are desperate to see sports, but, you know, with the COVID-19 pandemic going on, it's not easy to get people into stadiums and seeing things, but people have a huge appetite for sports. So we have turned our lab, we're basically full-time clinical work now on testing for COVID-19 and doing whatever we can to get people back to work, sport being one of them. So if there's anything we can do to assist you guys getting your sport back, we are absolutely fully committed. And thanks again for the opportunity, Mauricio. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That's sensational. You know, when there's always a situation of danger, of extreme concern, we can also find opportunities. So having the COVID-19 testing available is sensational. And the WBC has absolutely taken it under our wings to support it and to run with it the same way we do with the anti-doping testing. So there's many things that we'll be talking about together about this matter. Thank you for what you do for sports and for keeping the sport safe. Thank you so much, Doctor. And Alberto Leon, he is the WBC Vice President, and he has been working diligently with the clean boxing program to continue to run and to advise and to take every case that we have to address into a great process, which is clean and open for everyone. And David Benavidez, our current champion, who will be sharing his story with us in a few minutes. So let's get on to it. Victor, now please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to ask Dr. Goodman if she can explain what is the clean boxing program. How is this working with the WBC?
So basically, one thing that Mauricio accomplished was he was able to do something that no one else in the world was able to do, to create some uniformity in the sport. And as you know, the way boxing is regulated and run, every commission, every country does their own thing. But what the WBC was able to do was to get all of the fighters, not just the top rated, which you've obviously done, but so many other fighters. I think we probably have about 700 fighters from around the world that are enrolled. And obviously not all of them are currently rated. Some of them have nothing to do with the WBC per se. Maybe young fighters coming up, or fighters that are champions or rated in other organizations. And basically what Mauricio and the WBC, you guys have done, is have all these fighters indicate that they wanted to step up and support anti-doping. So the clean boxing program has all of those individuals enrolled. As a result of that, those fighters know that they are subject to 24/7, 365 days a year eligibility to be tested by VADA. And we test on behalf of the WBC. Now, like what Dr. Eichner recommended and indicated what they're doing over at his lab in Smartle, which is probably the foremost anti-doping lab in the world. And it's predominantly pretty much the only lab that we use now because they're so wonderful in helping all of us get our testing done expeditiously and doing the finest testing there is. We are able to test fighters anywhere. And so those fighters are subject for blood and urine testing, and now will also be subject for COVID-19 testing that will be run at Dr. Eichner's lab. And so basically we're not only involved in testing, we're also involved in education. With this off time, it just as we were talking about that it lets us reflect on other things, VADA has also been working on e-learning programs, which will start to be available at the end of the month and available to all the World Boxing Council fighters and everyone else as well, to learn more about supplements, what they should take, what they shouldn't take. The clean boxing program that the WBC has created is actually unique. And there is no other sport that I know of, and maybe I'm wrong, Dr. Eichner could probably correct me, that has no out-of-competition testing. And often it's been a sticking point for other organizations, but we require the fighters to be eligible for testing of all substances at any time. In other words, most organizations that are through the World Anti-Doping Agency that are signatories of that organization include only stimulants and things like narcotics only in competition. We believe that fighters are subject to the same type of trauma in training and sparring as they are in a fight. So one thing that Mauricio has been a huge proponent of is that we include all of that at all times. And so fighters are subject to all of those substances at any time. And the other thing is that we're always available for fighters to contact us, and many do on countless occasions, to ask about supplements. We've also instituted for the clean boxing program testing of supplements. So if a fighter would like to have his supplements tested, we're doing that through Banned Substance Control Group, and then they can get some information on all of that. But we've been so pleased, and I would say for the most part, the fighters are really thrilled to be involved. When our doping collection officers go, and we use the finest doping collection company in the world, Chloridium, when they show up, the fighters ask questions, then they subsequently ask questions to us. They continue to let us know of their whereabouts. We've also implemented for the clean boxing program an app that fighters can sign on, and then they can let us know their whereabouts at any time. So I really think that starting from the bottom, starting with absolutely nothing, the WBC program has really created something super special. And I can tell you what's of interest is several years ago when Mauricio first proposed this to the WBC board, I remember sitting at a World Boxing Council convention. I think it was one was here in Las Vegas. And I remember sitting next, I won't even name him, but sitting next to a very prominent promoter that said, there's no way this is going to work. There's nobody that's going to sign up. No promoter is going to want this to happen. And this is just, you know, Margaret, you're just living in a pipe dream. And I said, well, I know Mauricio can accomplish just about anything. And then sooner than later, these guys all started signing up. Now we're doing the women fighters, and they've been just superb. They are so happy to be tested. It's like they welcome us. And obviously with COVID-19, we're taking all kinds of precautions. We have a whole set of regulations and rules that we're following that even go beyond what WADA and the CDC has recommended to make sure that the fighters feel safe when we show up. So I'm really pleased that everything that you guys have helped create, it's fantastic. It's unbelievable to me.
Thank you, Doctor. David, how important is for you as a fighter?
Well, you know, first of all, I want to thank you guys, you know, for inviting me on in this show. I think what the WBC is doing with the clean boxing program is an amazing thing. You know, I feel like every fighter should be held accountable for the action. You know, just like how I was. You know, I was doing some stuff that shouldn't have been done. I don't know. I tested positive for cocaine, and you know, I was held accountable. You know, I was suspended almost, was it a year, and then I got a fine. So I feel like just that alone, that put a lot of things in perspective for me. And now seeing that VADA could come, you know, whenever time, you know, because I signed off on it, they could come at whatever time they please. I feel like I'm thinking a little bit smarter now. You know, I feel like now I gotta be, you know, the cleanest boxer I can be, you know, because I don't want to go back to what I was doing and, you know, be out of boxing for a whole another year, you know. So I feel like, you know, thank you to Mauricio Sulaimán in the WBC. I was given a second chance and another opportunity, you know, to become a champion, you know, because everybody makes mistakes, you know, here and there, everybody makes mistakes, but as long as you're given a second opportunity, I feel like that's what matters the most. And now, you know, you know, anytime BATA comes, you know, they could test me as much times as they want. You know, I'm here, you know, I'm doing my part in the clean boxing program. So, you know, I want to thank you guys again for giving me that second opportunity to be the champion I know I could be.
And,
you know, I would like to just address a little bit David case. He won the WBC World Championship, which is the dream of every fighter, when he was only 19 years old. So you're a kid, you reach success. With success comes fame, glory, and money. And of course, as we all know, in any sports, in any entertainment activity, also we have there's so many distractions and temptations. David fell into a trap. His life was derailed, and incredibly through the clean boxing program, with this finding, he was able to change that very bad road he had taken, and now he has been gone into the right path. He moved away to a different state. He moved away from the place where he was having that hub of temptations. He changed his lifestyle. He got back to his family, he got back to God. He had all sorts of aid, you know, spiritual, psychological, all different sorts of testings. And I cannot express in words the pride that I have for David Benavidez.
And, you know, also I wanted to tell you too, you know, I had a lot of people, you know, that are on my side, but the one person too that I'm mostly great about is, you know, Mauricio Sulaimán. Every time I see him, you know, he'd tell me, you know what, David, we have faith in you, you know, just keep working hard, you know, stay focused. And, you know, that really meant a lot to me, only because Mauricio Sulaimán and his family had been in boxing around the best boxers in the world for years and years and years, generations. You know, so for Mauricio Sulaimán to tell me that every time he see me, you know, he treated me like a son. He treated me like family every time I seen him. And, you know, that always meant a lot to me, you know what I mean? So I feel like, you know, I don't know how grateful I don't think you know how grateful I am for this opportunity and everything you've given me, Mauricio Sulaimán. I'm always be grateful for you, you know, always. And like I said, thank you for the second opportunity, and I'll never disappoint you again.
Yes, and you make us proud. You're the pride of the WBC. You make us so proud. I love your father, who is like your brother. When I saw them, I thought they were brothers. Unbelievable. And you're just a great seal of success. You're a success story of the clean boxing program. And you motivate us. And you have taken it like a man. And I'm just very proud of you. And I cannot wait to see you in the ring after this COVID-19 era gets past.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys, and I appreciate you guys taking the time out to having me and talking to me on here too. And I hope everybody has a blessed day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mauricio, what is the importance of this program and how hard was to bring it on?
Well, we had, as Dr. Goodman clearly stated, in 1975, the WBC began anti-doping tests, mandatory after each fight. And that was a huge step for sports. And then my father he tried to keep up with the doping world. It became such an industry, especially in the Olympics, in the high-level athletes in other sports. And my father always had this great concern about doping and keeping up with the progress of this difficult situation. We worked with Dr. I forgot, from UCLA, Dr.
Catlin. John Catlin.
Dr. Catlin, exactly, thank you.
Huh?
He created a great document. We created a great document which was the leading spot to go into the clean boxing program. Then Dr. Goodman and I met at the NABF convention. She had a great speech. Then we had lunch together, and Luis Escalona was there, and we just got great enthusiasm. We said, let's do it. So it took some time to prepare the protocols and prepare the work that was to be done, all that had to be in place before you go out into a program. So we launched it, and just as we launch it, we get Bandido Vargas and Salido. I think that was the first case, Dr. Goodman, correct?
I think so. I think so.
We get, just weeks after we launch it, we get this case with clenbuterol. And it was perfectly managed by the California State Athletic Commission. We worked together. It was a situation of this very well-known clenbuterol problem. And at the end, the fight took place. It was a fight of the year, and the program proved to be correct. And then I remember very well, I was having breakfast at the Four Seasons in Mexico City with some people, and here I see in my phone Margaret Goodman. From that day on, every time I see her name on my phone, I start trembling.
You're not the only one. I know. I know.
And she says, Mauricio, I'm so sorry. Povetkin has tested positive for, and she said the substance, I have no idea. I still have no idea of many of these substances. I don't know about it. Meldonium. I'm like, what's meldonium? And blah, 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 blah. So we have to do all that we have to do. So we have had 18 positives during this process. Every time it's very difficult, but the key of the program is transparency. And immediately, there's no, there's positive, it goes out, and everybody's notified, and then we have to take the actions. So I would say the difficult part is when we get that call from Dr. Goodman. And, but it's highly gratifying. I mean, David Benavidez' case is a huge example. And sometimes what we strive for is for justice. We try to do the strongest effort to do the research and find down to the most possible way what happened in that positive case. Yes, Alberto?
I just wanted to mention, Mauricio, that in the clenbuterol situation, you know, that's one of the situations where I'm the proudest of being part of this program, because with Dr. Goodman and Dr. Eichner's support, I believe that the WBC was a pioneer in establishing policies for clenbuterol. And I believe that over a year later, after we decided, more than that, after we decided the first clenbuterol case, basically WADA came out and has basically adopted a policy that is very similar to the policy that we adopted when we decided those cases. As far as increasing the threshold, as far as a lot of the things that they came up with were things that the clean boxing program had taken into account when making its clenbuterol decisions. And that's a testament to how great this program is.
I don't know if Dr. Eichner would like to add anything about how that changed and how that's affected them as well. I don't know if...
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think what happened was, you know, before you guys had your high profile cases and conducted the results management in a correct, you know, common sense approach, there was a lot of people out there that had their head in the sand, and they just figured any positive meant sanction. And we all know now, and there's plenty of case law on it, that some individuals can be exposed through meat contamination, through environmental contamination. And I think, you know, without some high profile cases that you guys went through, and I'm sure it was hard work at your end, you know, the world would be a different place right now where all athletes would be considered guilty regardless of them. And unfortunately, not all the athletic commissions have signed on. You know, we had a very high profile boxer that, you know, as far as I was concerned, had a textbook case, but the athletic commissions have their own policies on how they handle these things, and some of them haven't quite caught up with this standard right now. But I think that the more work that the VADA and WBC can do together, then these athletic commissions will actually understand on how to handle these things going forward.
Dr. Eichner, how hard it is to make a standard for all the fighters, people that live in Mexico or Asia or Argentina or US, Europe? They eat different things, there are different customs. How hard is to make this standard?
You know what? It actually isn't. And the thing is that every case is unique. And so you have a results management process. So Dr. Goodman will get a result, for example, and it doesn't matter where the athlete was tested. She will have a look to see what that result looks like. In some instances, what that concentration of the substance was. And then she can do a root cause analysis and see, has this person been anywhere near a country that has had known issues with meat contamination, for example? And so she can dial it back to that way. So you can have a worldwide program that is consistent. And the only thing that really needs to be known is there evidence of meat contamination in those countries? And if there isn't, we can still look and do further testing. So she's not limited just on that one test result. She can go back and get further testing. And that information can be really important in looking at to see whether this is consistent with someone who might have been exposed, you know, 2 weeks ago in China, or someone who's been exposed very recently. And all that information is really a case-by-case basis. And I think the results management process that the WBC set up captures that one. So I have no concerns under this program of an athlete getting sanctioned for something they didn't deliberately do.
Mauricio, usually a fighter will be in that list and will be in the program, so he can prove that he is clean. And if he doesn't want to be in the list, it says something from him. Is there any rejection from the fighters, or they have agreed?
Yeah, we have had one simple case, Baby Joe Miller. He was ranked by the WBC. When he entered the top 15, we sent the letters to enroll in VADA, in the clean boxing program. He did not. Then he said he was going to enroll. He was ranked again. We sent the papers in, never enrolled, so he was out. That's a clear-cut case. During this pandemic, we did a lot of administrative work. So we did updates in every single division. We contacted a fighter from Argentina, Lemos. He had not enrolled. It was time for him to enroll. And he simply had his promoter respond and say, you know, we're not enrolling in the clean boxing program because we're going to fight for another organization. That was his way out. He did not enroll. And it's a simple case that it simply leaves you wondering, why would someone not enroll? But on the other hand, we have so many fighters who have enrolled voluntarily, even if they're not ranked. And that's a great statement. We believe fighters are innocent. We believe they want clean boxing. We believe they want to protect themselves. And it's a complicated issue. I mean, we want to have as many tests as possible, which covers more and helps you grow the program. But we will put more resources and more time into the awareness. Dr. Goodman has developed a tremendous app for the whereabouts. This app, the key for the program to be a success, you need to know where the fighter is at every single hour, because at any time the collection officer might show up. So if they show up and you're not there, then it's a missed test. We have had 30 missed tests, and that's an issue. The missed test can evolve into a finding or a belief of being this, of a positive, you know, and start with different consequences. But for example, Heather Hardy, she's an enthusiastic of the clean boxing program. And very unfortunately, she had a positive when she fought in New York. And I met with her in New York. She was devastated. And she believes, and the way it looks, it was something of the medicine that she took for her menstrual period. But without going into specifics, we believe in the cleanliness of fighters, and but this is the top priority for the WBC, and there's so much that we need to do to improve. And that's what I would like to ask Dr. Goodman and Dr. Eichner. What can we do to improve and to continuously be improving the clean boxing program?
I'll let Dr. Eichner, if he has any suggestions for us, we'd welcome anything with his experience.
Thanks, Margaret, and I apologize, my phone won't turn off in the back.
He's like one of the most busiest people on earth.
Sorry about that.
So kind for you to be here.
No, you're very kind. So absolutely, there is some things that we can always improve on. I mean, if we sat back and looked at all the good work that's been done over the last 20 years and said we've done everything, we wouldn't improve, and we would get left behind. And so, you know, some of the things that we partnered with Margaret on already is some of the alternative collection matrices. So instead of always having to collect, you know, putting a blood collection officer in the field that's doing a venous draw, you know, we're really trying to do more work for finger pricks or an upper arm collection. And that's just a really simple thing that can be done by the athlete. Push a button, it loads a cartridge, and then you can do your blood passport testing, you can do your growth hormone testing. And so those pieces there are so important because A, it saves a lot of money because you don't need a phlebotomist anymore. You don't need to ship that sample temperature controlled cold overnight. So you're saving hundreds of dollars per collections, but more importantly, you now have access to being able to do collections anywhere in the world where it was difficult to get, you know, collection officers in there or do the shipping overnight. You can get access to those individuals anywhere. And because it's so much cheaper to do that collection, you can do more collections. And so at the end of the day, our goal is really to deter people from making a poor choice. And, you know, if they get tested right now, you know, a few times a year for blood, you know, they might still think, hey, I can run the gauntlet and maybe sneak through a growth hormone cycle every now and then. But if you went to the dried blood spots, for example, and you could do the same, you know, for the same money, you could do 2 or 3 times as many tests. Well, now it's much more difficult for these guys, and they don't even think about, I'm not even going to take that chance. And so I think some of those areas there, you don't need to spend any money to improve it. You just need to be innovative and, you know, jump on the new technology. And Margaret has been. I think that kind of stuff will really improve your program, and it'll get you great PR. No one, you know, no one's doing these things. The professional leagues in North America would die to do some of these things there, but they have a union that they go through with a collectively bargain agreement. If any baseball fans are out there, there is no baseball right now because these guys hate each other. You can implement this, and I think that it would really strengthen your program and give you a lot of really good people would say, I want to sign up to that program because this is the best, and it's actually less invasive. I mean, I wish I had a device here. You stick it on your arm and you push a button, wait a couple minutes, and it loads, and you take it off, ship it in room temperature. I mean, it's fantastic technology.
Yeah, we'd really like to start doing that. I've talked to Chloridium, who's our doping collection company, and they're ready to start on that. And I think they were actually going to be in touch with you ASAP about doing that, because we would like to be able to follow the blood passport more easily. We've been doing that, Mauricio, on especially most of the high profile fights that you have. We've included that to follow them for their blood counts. And also it'd be so much easier to check for growth hormone, because I worry we don't do that enough. And obviously we can't do blood testing so close right before an event. I don't want anybody to have a problem with their arm or their hand, but we've been able to implement that as well. And I really think that the COVID-19 testing that you have available is just extremely helpful. Mauricio, they were using that. They used that for the top ranked fights that have been held here in Las Vegas. And we've talked to other commissions about implementing that as well. I think maybe Dr. Eichner will show you the device, but we're offering that now to your CBP fighters. He can show you how easy it is. It's a saliva test. It really detects quite readily. It's one of the best tests out there. And I think for promoters, Mauricio, when they're trying to start back and have fights, you know, it's a real concern. I mean, you saw what happened even this last couple of weeks with some of the top ranked fights with the fighters not being able to compete because they couldn't, you know, they were tested so late. So I think, you know, that's what we're going to be including when we do our anti-doping testing. So to make sure, and especially for those promoters who want to know several weeks in advance, do they have a fighter that's infected, could be infected, or is at risk that they don't want to bring in, and then they don't have to go through that whole thing. Especially a lot of these promoters don't have the funds to have the fighters housed at a hotel for 2 weeks. So this, you know, you can do this way out. We're doing this for some commissions now where there's, it's like 4 weeks out, just so that they can screen. So anyway, Dr. Eichner, you could show how easy this is.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dr. Goodman. I mean, if everyone can see the devices here, what we really like about these ones is if anyone's had the nasal test before, has anyone had that before? Hands up. It doesn't feel good. It really hurts.
No.
This one here is really simple. And so the advantage of doing saliva is that you don't need to have a medical professional conduct the test. So you're not putting someone, you know, potentially in close proximity to someone who's positive. And then the buffer that comes with these kits, it actually deactivates the virus, but it also keeps the RNA intact. So what that means is whoever's helping with the shipping, the transportation, or the analysis of the kit is now not dealing with live virus. And so Alberto, you'll appreciate this with your background, is that we can now ship these in the regular mail because it's deactivated virus. And it can be shipped at room temperature, stable for 2 weeks, really great kits, fantastic technology. I wish I had shares in the company, but they're a private company. But what happens is they come in a unique pouch. You can see that. It just has a wide lip at the top, and there's nothing glamorous. You just spit into it. It has a line that you fill it up to, and when that line is reached, it has a lid that comes with it that's separate, and that has the blue buffer that you can see in there, and that's the one that stabilizes the RNA but deactivates the virus. All you do is you just take off the top, put the lid on, twist it, and as you twist it, the buffer will then be released into the device, and you shake a couple times. That's stable for at least 2 weeks at room temperature and can be shipped regular mail now. And so that one there, then you just get it to a lab that has approval to do this saliva testing. And, you know, depending on the relationship you have with the laboratory, you can get a result in 5 or 6 hours. And that makes it much easier to know whether you're going to be putting someone in harm's way when they're coming in there. That's, you know, one piece there. Another thing that we really like, and this is what Margaret was talking about, doing the testing in advance. One of the limitations with the technology when you're doing that diagnostic test is that the instrument sometimes can't differentiate between virus that's live and virus that's broken up into particles and not active anymore. And so for example, if you were infected a month ago and you cleared the virus, there's possibilities that you could still test positive another month later, even though you're not contagious. And so, you know, that's an issue. And we actually just had it with one of our events here, this exact scenario. And one thing that could have saved that person is that if they'd done an antibody test, and these things are literally just a finger prick test. They come in little individual sachets. You do a finger prick, and it measures the antibody response. So what that does is, instead of measuring the active virus, it measures your immune response. So if you've been infected, knowingly or unknowingly, and you've developed antibodies, you will not be contagious later on. And so, you know, if you have that one case where someone's been infected before, not contagious, but still test positive, you don't want to pull that poor kid from the fight. And so by doing that kind of test, that doesn't even need a lab. You know, if you buy the right device, you can literally just do it in the field. It's a finger prick. You get a result in 2 or 3 minutes. It's not diagnostic, but it's very, very informative if you're going to be running a program later on to make sure that these kids weren't, you know, accused of having a false positive, if you will.
Dr. Eichner, do you know how many labs across, like for example, in the US are running the saliva test? I don't have that information.
There isn't many. And so the way that it's done in the US, and every country is going to be different, but the US has something where the FDA has to approve the technology. And so any kind of clinical lab can do the testing of the nasal swab, no problems at all. If they want to do the saliva test, they have to apply for what's called an emergency use authorization. And what you have to do is you have to establish that whatever kit you're using, that it compares equally well, if not better, than the current technology. And so the lab has to do that themselves. And so we have an emergency use authorization for this specific kit. There are other saliva kits out there. I know of 3 labs that can do this one, but I know of at least one other kit that has a lab that has what they call an EUA, emergency use authorization on that one. So there's several, and around the world, they have them as well. I don't know that market as well, but they definitely have other labs. But it's not as, you couldn't just go to Quest or LabCorp, the big lab. They're not running it. And that's an issue. And, you know, from the feedback we've had, everybody loves to spit into the tube as opposed to get something jammed up their nose.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, Mauricio, what we've been doing is because we have those kits, and smart old Dr. Eichner's lab can run those tests. So what we do is when we do our anti-doping tests with the urine, the doping collection officers are sending it to Dr. Eichner's lab. So it's run at the exact same time. And that way we can get the results within about 24 hours. Because every test that we do for you and every test that VADA does is expedited. So we overnight everything. We don't just ship. You know, that happens. I've seen that happen with a lot of other anti-doping agencies where they just, you know, ship things. It can take days or weeks, even if it's coming from a foreign country. So this way it gets right to the lab and they can run that really quickly. So we have both.
That's a really good point. And I forgot to mention is that we're doing the COVID testing way quicker than we can do the anti-doping testing, and purely because we're looking for one thing as opposed to 300 plus compounds. And so we guarantee 24-hour turnaround time on the COVID testing.
Yeah.
But importantly, if we get that sample that gets delivered to us by 8 a.m. in the morning, they have a delivery that comes at 8 a.m. in the morning, you get that result that day. And so, you know, if you're having programs where you're really desperate to see what that result is, or within some kind of quarantine program, we won't hold you up on that one there. So that's been something that we're really striving for. If you go to, you know, the bigger labs, some of them are still 5 or 6 days. And so, you know, we're really focusing on people that are getting back to work or sport where they need that result straight away.
Yeah, that's been great.
We're living in a difficult time to even picture how things are evolving. What would you say? Why is a fighter motivated to use PEDs? Is there a trend? Is there a series of bad people going into the gyms and offering substances, bad influence? It's a personal decision. How would you define the current state of doping in the sport of boxing?
You know, if you give me a couple of minutes, what I would like to compare it with some other sports. And so if we look at some of the other sports we work with, when they're at an age where they're not making any money, you know, if we use a sport that has a minor league system, for example, we see a lot of doping at that level because those kids aren't making any money. However, if they can move up to that next level, you know, they can go from literally making $30,000 a year to making a minimum of $550,000 a year. So we see a lot of doping at that lower level in some of those sports. And then when they make it to that big level, we don't see as much because there's too much to lose by that stage. They've made it there. They've got to keep it going. If we compare you with another fighting sport, like MMA, for example, you know, when we first started testing one of those programs, it was the Wild West. They were taking absolutely everything. And it wasn't just the up and coming ones that wanted to make their name. It was everybody. And that was a huge issue. And I think they're trying better, but it seems to be ingrained in that culture almost, where it's hard for them to get out. And I think some of the federations are doing the best they can, but that's different. Boxing isn't like that. It doesn't seem to be, you know, and Margaret, I'm sure, has stories from before my time, but from what we've seen, and we've been doing this for a solid 10 years now, at the high level, we don't see a lot of doping cases. We really don't. You know, at the lower levels, there's not as much testing there, and I think that the individual athletic commissions, they'll use the cheapest place to do testing. And so, you know, I know, for example, that, you know, one of the athletic commissions that does a lot of fights, on their lower level ones, they'll only test for 20 different steroids, you know, as opposed to when VADA does it, it's over 100 different steroids. So they don't see a lot of those ones. But, you know, as far as why people would dope, I mean, the problem is that some of the substances will let you train harder and longer. And so, you know, if a fighter is not in good condition and they want to take a quick way to get back to fitness, well, they can get you there. So there's the incentive that way. But as far as the culture goes, I mean, like with the unannounced testing program, I think it's tough to get away with it. You know, with the true unannounced, you know, independent program, the kids have no way of knowing when the collector comes. I don't really see it in the culture. And Margaret, please help me out, because you know a lot more from traditionally how boxing looked.
You know, I think that, and Mauricio can attest to this too, that in certain environments, we see so much where the fighter really doesn't know what they've taken. And I think part of that comes from the culture, especially in boxing, where so many of these kids, both the men and the women, they start at such young ages where they just have people around them telling them what to do from day one, you know. And it's not just in taking things, it's also because someone's saying, just giving it to them, and they don't ask questions. And so one of the great things about the clean boxing program that we want to do more, and that was another reason why I started on this off time working on these e-learning things when we can't, you know, have big projects where we have fighters come to seminars, is for fighters to take more responsibility for themselves. You know, I always told this old story, Mauricio, when I was a ring physician and I would sit at the weigh-in, and right before the weigh-in, I'd be examining the fighter, we'd be going over their paperwork, and they would have to write down, you know, what they've been taking in the last month. And I would see things like aspirin. You know, well, obviously aspirin isn't a controlled substance, but oh my God, is that like the worst thing for a fighter to take before a fight? And, you know, they're going to bleed more. I remember so many fights I worked because these fighters were pumping themselves up on Advil, Aleve, aspirin, and they didn't understand that. And that kind of made me think that they needed to know, because when I would tell a fighter about taking something or not taking, I would have maybe a trainer over me saying, don't talk to them about this. You're going to make them nervous. You're going to. But I think as time has gone on, and one of the things the WBC has done, and one of the things we try to do with VADA, is educate the athletes themselves. And my goodness, with a resource like Dr. Eichner and the resources we have available, so many of these fighters are taking advantage of it. You know, we work with a program through drug-free sport called Axis, and the fighters themselves can establish their own account. They don't go through us. It's private. There's no cost. They can ask any question they want, and it's anonymous. And so I think them using the internet, using the things on their phone to take advantage of this, by letting the fighters learn themselves that they need to take responsibility for themselves, and that's what this program is doing, it makes such a huge difference. And it's not just with anti-doping, it's also with, like you talked about, symptoms of concussion. You know, the fighters need to know that they're responsible for themselves, and they can ask these questions and learn all this themselves in simple ways and don't have to rely on other people. So I think a lot of the issues that we have had, Mauricio, and that we will probably continue to have, come because people are just giving them things, telling them this is okay to take, this, don't worry, it's legal. They take the chance and they don't ask the question. And so by doing that, and it's not just with that, I mean, it goes beyond, you know, Dr. Hlamanski and I created a book many years ago called Ringside and Training Principles. And in there, not just on anti-doping, but on training things. They need to say, you know, if they have a headache or they don't feel good, that they can say they want to stop, you know, instead of just being pushed into things, or when to sign a contract, how to sign a contract. Those kind of things should be something that they take responsibility for them. And you can see some of these really successful fighters that are WBC champions, and just like Mr. Benavidez and fighters like, you know, Canelo and Golovkin, they take those responsibilities themselves. I mean, Oscar can tell you about that. So I think that's another thing that this program has done.
So I am a fighter, and I'm using 8 different supplements. So what do I do? I contact Access. Is that the name? Access?
Mm-hmm.
ACCESS?
No, AXIS.
AXIS.com.
Yeah, well, it's DFS Access. I'll send it to you again. But it's on, when every fighter signs up to VADA, they get an information sheet on how to do that. And I would tell you that's probably the biggest call that we get. I was talking to one of the attorneys that deals with a lot of fighters yesterday, and he said he was talking to one of his former champions that retired, that did all his fights with VADA, and he said, oh my God, he used to go through hours and hours and asking questions to them. And it was for a way for him to make himself feel more comfortable. I mean, it's hard unless you're one of the fighters making more money to get their supplements tested, but that's something that's available through us as well. And so that's another reason that this is so good that you're having this, that they can contact VADA and how to get their supplements tested through Banned Substance Control Group. There's other organizations that do that as well. And I was actually just recently talking to Vlad Klitschko about that, and he's a big proponent of that, and getting the knowledge themselves, because Dr. Eichner can tell you, you have no clue what's in anything and where it's manufactured. Can it be manufactured with prohibited substances? You're going to get dinged on or popped for something that you don't take the information. And one of the good things about Access is no organization will actually approve supplements. You know, you can do it through all these other big things like UCAT or USADA. Nobody will approve supplements because they just don't know. I mean, there's so many times where they're manufactured with illegal substances or near something. So, but what they can do with Access is they can find out, has this company had things that have turned up positive before? Has this particular substance had a problem before? And then sometimes it becomes their responsibility, but there's ways around that they can do a lot of their own homework, and it's so easy to do with, you know, one finger on the internet to try to find out, and they can use us for that all the time.
Should trainers be responsible when there's a doping positive? How far should we go and make the trainer or the personal fitness coach or whatever responsible for that doping?
Boy, from my standpoint, nobody liked this. I mean, I get enough hate mail as it is, but I think that they should be responsible. I think at least, I wish commissions would do this. You know, Flip Homansky and I have talked about this so many times, that if we would also, because sometimes, you know, even if it is the fighter's responsibility, there's other people around them that are giving them things, that are working with them, whether it's a conditioning person, it's a dietitian, it's a trainer. I think at least when you're doing your adjudication process, or when we're having the fighters enrolled, that they know that they're responsible too. Because sometimes someone's giving someone something or recommending something, they get recommended in the gym, or they're sold this product from somebody that they know, that they should be held responsible. I think it's not done hardly at all in boxing. You know, I think in some of these other decisions that go forward from the Court of Arbitration for Sport, all these things come into play. But in boxing, I think that it would be very important, and Alberto can talk to that, at least bringing those people in to discuss that, because I know no one wants to finger anybody else, but I think that by making other people responsible as well, it just holds everyone accountable. You know, Flip's thing was that he thought that the promoter should be accountable. He said the number one to get rid of doping in sport would be make the promoter involved as well, and that they will hold the fighters' feet or hands to the fire, so to speak. But but why not at least have that as part of the inquiry?
Mauricio and Dr. Goodman, yeah, you're correct. I mean, there would have to obviously be a way to enforce that responsibility on the part of trainers or advisors or promoters. You know, some kind of licensing requirement with the WBC or some kind of contractual commitment that they are certifying that their boxer is clean. And if the boxer turns out not to be clean, then we can allocate responsibility to the trainer. But I think that what Mauricio is saying is very much on point, because a lot of the cases that we see are cases in which the fighters just take whatever is given to them. The fighters do not sometimes read the labels, they trust the people who train them, they trust the people who condition them. So where is their accountability? I believe that there should be some.
Totally.
We have you work so hard on a webinar, and we have it, it's mandatory for every fighter to watch the webinar. Do you think we should do an upgrade, a redo of the webinar?
Mm-hmm. I do, because some things have changed. And also, you look so wonderful now. You should put that in. Sorry to go there, but it's true. So, no, I think it definitely should, and it could be, and I don't think it would be a big expense. And then also, like I said, I've been putting together 4 e-learning segments on supplements and prohibited substances, even one on concussion that I think would be really important for the WBC to have as well.
Can you see a photo? Look.
You're the only one that looks better as time goes on. It's like a movie star here, according to. So, you know, I think that's really important. I think that would be easy to do. The organization that did the webinar in the first place, I think would be happy to help us with that. It really wouldn't be a big deal.
Yes, I think we should do a redo and update it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's like 5 years old now, 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, and some of that I covered in some of these e-learnings that'll be available for the WBC to put as part of their clean boxing program. But I think, you know, it would really help to have that. I mean, you know, education, you can't beat it. And I think as time goes on, fighters learn how easy it is for them to do these things themselves. I mean, they're all on Twitter and Instagram and all of this stuff. And I think it would be a way for them to access things and make it clear. Because this is what we're about. I mean, I think Mr. Benavidez, you know, gave an amazing story. And, you know, I think the one thing that maybe wasn't mentioned in his story was what was the danger to him as a fighter? You know, somebody that gets hit in the head that's using cocaine. I mean, you know, we can talk about anabolic steroids and all these other things that Dr. Eichner's lab is fantastic in testing for. But something as simple as that is probably one of the most harmful things to a fighter. And so I think that's why it's so important that this was stopped early for him, because the risk could be great. I can tell you as a neurologist, one of the most common incidences of death from cerebral aneurysm or cerebral hemorrhage in a young person is cocaine and stimulant use.
Wow.
So I think that, you know, this is just a very strong story that he brought forth that's so important to all fighters. You know, I mean, there's no greater risk than that. I mean, what kills fighters? You know, what kills fighters is having a severe injury, acute injury to the brain, and stimulants are probably one of the biggest causes. So.
Yes, Alberto?
Yeah, I wanted to also, I know that we are running out of time. I hope that we still have a little bit more time, because there are 2 points, Dr. Goodman and Dr. Eichner, that I would like to bring up. And is number 1, education about temporary use exemptions, which I believe is so important to develop the tools to educate the athletes and their camps about what a temporary use exemption is and what it's used for. And that topic may have been touched upon a little bit earlier, but I think that we need to be firm about that. and then the second is education about updating whereabouts forms, which is a huge potential problem. I think the office, the WBC office, has done a tremendous job, especially during the down months of the pandemic, to really get on top of having us updated in that regard. But if you, Dr. Goodman and Dr. Eichner, could educate us a little bit about that, that would be great.
Well, you know, it's so funny because I look at all these things, you know, Dr. Eichner could talk about that, but I see all these things on Twitter and discussions about, you know, athletes missing their whereabouts. And then, I mean, I think that we've been doing an incredible job. I mean, although I will say that most of the fighters fail to advise us of their whereabouts. And one thing that Klaridiem, I will give them great PR and kudos for, is they tend to follow all your fighters on Instagram. So, you know, I'm not saying please don't use that as an excuse, because especially they can use the app, but boy, I mean, all you have to do is look at one of these guys or women's Instagram and you can pretty much find out where they are at most times of the day. So that makes it a little bit easier. Twitter is also something that we use too to kind of keep track. But we've actually had very low incidence of whereabouts failures. It actually has been good. And I think now with implementing the app, it's been updated and it's so easy to use. I think it'll make a huge difference. So it's good. Yeah, and I love this article that you guys did on cocaine, because I mean, these stimulants drive me crazy because I just think it's just so unrecognized by our athletes.
We have a question. I'm sorry. Yes, Victor.
Go ahead.
No, we have a question coming from Cynthia, but it's finishing. Please go ahead.
I think sometimes it's hard for the fighter to understand that recreation drugs are not harming him in that way. It's part of the education.
100%. You know, one thing that's not prohibited, obviously, that probably in a chronic level is of great danger to a fighter more than anything else is alcohol. You know, I mean, I think that some of the fighters, Mauricio can talk about, that are retired that had just giant problems with alcohol. You know, as a neurologist, from my standpoint, you know, people think about alcohol affecting the liver and other organs, but I can tell you that the biggest toxin to the brain is alcohol. And not that I'm trying to say nobody should have a drink ever, that's not the point. But fighters that too often abuse alcohol or binge drink, they don't understand what it does to the central nervous system. It affects their balance. It affects their nerve endings, so they can't feel as well where their feet are. And so in a fight, I often see fighters that I know of that are currently competing that have had problems with alcohol, and it affects them to a great deal. The other thing that alcohol does is it kills our brain cells. So over time, especially the balance center called the cerebellum in the back of the brain that kind of controls your coordination and being able to do this or walk a straight line, it affects that in such a great deal, not just in an acute basis if somebody's just been drinking, but over time. And so one of the biggest toxins to a fighter that they don't understand is binge drinking or chronic alcohol use. And I'm not talking about falling down drunk. I'm just saying chronic alcohol use is probably one of the most dangerous things to all of our fighters. And when we've done brain scans on the fighters, we often see that there's been changes and shrinkage of those parts of their brains more than anywhere else. And there's all different ways of telling. And some of the drug tests that Dr. Eichner has done, every once in a while we get back a result and I'll say, well, what does this mean? And they go, well, it shows evidence, even though it's not considered a prohibited substance by WADA or even by VADA, that we look for that and we can see that somebody probably is a drinker. And then I can look at their performance and, you know, I wish I could go say, stop drinking so much because it's ruining your career.
You know what's a great danger? When you train and you do sparring, your brain swells. Then you go home or after training and you have drinks. That brain, instead of going back to normal and healing through the normal way, remains swollen because of the alcohol. And then it's more dangerous when you continue doing the sparring without the process of unswelling of the brain.
There's so many things that, you know, I wish just young fighters, and that's really, you know, it's just like with everything. We just want to, these young kids that are coming up, these men and women that are working so very hard, just to know some little points like this that can change their whole life, you know. And in for example, going back to Mr. Benavidez, it could have changed his life in so many ways. Besides him changing his life around, it could have, this could really have protected him in a bout, you know, or in sparring. We've had, I remember a couple of years ago, we've had fighters that in the gym, they suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. And then it was found that they were using stimulants and using recreational drugs like cocaine. And, you know, I just think that it's important. It's not just important in a fight, it's important for their career. You know, they need, I mean, boxing is a profession. It's not an avocation or a hobby.
We have a question from Cynthia Conte. She would like to know you and Dr. Eichner opinion on the female Olympiad who was ruled at no fault as the PEDs were transmitted by sex from her partner. She would like to know your opinion.
I'm going to throw that one to Dr. Eichner because, boy, that one amazes me.
Oh my goodness, hospital pass. So there is a study that was done in Brazil about 12 years ago, and there is some creams in South America in general, in Latin America, where they use prohibited substances even on over-the-counter products. And there was a study where they used a vaginal cream and they had sex with their partner, and they wanted to see if their partner could be exposed to that prohibited substance from the vaginal cream. And there was an indication that that could happen. So that has now been extrapolated into, well, now if the male partner is using a prohibited substance, and, you know, knowingly or unknowingly, could they then pass that on to the female? So there is no data that supports that hypothesis. I'm not aware of anyone doing that study. We've been asked to do the study, and for the obvious reasons, we have declined. I think it'd be tough to get an IRB approval, and to part of the study design, would we have to put in a cost of a bed and sheets and so forth. So we can't do that here. But, you know, is it possible that you could get environmental exposure from another individual that was using substances? Yeah. And I mean, you know, some of the instances have been with, you know, with more illicit substances. You know, a cocaine user could pass on a low level amount of cocaine to their partner through intimacy. That could happen. You know, the recent cases, if you're talking about the Canadian one, there was a Canadian canoer, and that one where they did a whole bunch of testing and they thought it had to have come from something other than her using it. They went with that one. There was 2 recent cases here in the US last week that came out. And, you know, from what we understand is that they looked at every other possibility and said, well, we don't know where it came from, therefore it must have come from something like this, as opposed to any strong data on there. I would caution the WBC, you know, before we start making those determinations, to have a little bit more data to support it. But it's, in some circumstances, it's possible.
Okay. One last question also from Cynthia. She would like to, she's discussing about Michaela Meyer, the COVID test, which turned positive. And she's talking about it's a long question. It's gonna be hard to take it. But basically she says that the antibody test showed that she was infected few months back, and that she should have been able to fight, that she was not infectious. And she's just asking if there's any news that you have about her case and how that was treated at that moment by the commission.
I can't speak about a specific case. I mean, they'd have to go to the commission on that one there, but this is what we talked about earlier. If you complement, you know, your testing program by using both the antibody test as well as the diagnostic PCR test, you should be able to differentiate the ones that have been previously exposed and will not be contagious from the ones that are currently contagious. And I think that's a smart way to do it. I think we're at a very beginning where a lot of the individual athletic commissions are going to have to learn these things very quickly. And, you know, if anything happened, you know, recently, you know, my bet is it's really a learning curve for the athletic commissions before they really understand. And right now, until they're 100% confident, I think they're going to err on the side of caution, and any positive is a positive, and let's not take the risk there. So I think we're going to learn a lot more and hopefully educate the individual commissions a lot more. But, you know, that's something that, you know, if we could have a, you know, a global organization like WBC drive something like that through VADA, I think we could really disseminate that education to the individual commissions, because these guys that run the commissions, they're good at regulating fights. You know, then they had to learn doping. Now they're trying to learn COVID. I mean, like, it's these poor guys are getting massacred. It's really hard for them.
Cannot be more, how can I say, that was so clear. I mean, not even the world knows about COVID, much less to expect. They took the safe road, and I believe that was correct. And Micaela has bright future, so she can compete in the near future. Well, we're getting there. Thank you so very much for your time. I believe this has been a wonderful panel, a wonderful round 60 to wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that Xochitl would like to add something.
Thank you, Mauricio. Well, I just want to tell the panel that I want to put on disposition the educational platform from the WBC University. I've worked before with Dr. Goodman on putting together a part of the program Nutrition and Weight in Boxing, which the first model is the Clean Boxing program. So maybe we need to do an update and be ready with all these new considerations that we have, and just the university is yours also, so we can keep working together. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there anything you would like to add, Dr. Goodman, Dr. Eichner, Alberto?
Well, not on my part, just to thank you, Mauricio, and thank Dr. Goodman and Dr. Eichner and Victor for being here. I think this program has been great, and let's just keep going.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eichner. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Margaret, Kiss, and what we do, we learn in this process, we do a virtual hug. So we just get close to the camera and give a hug. So come close, Dr. Goodman. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
I would like to add, I found 4 words for this program. I think it is educational, that it's really, really important for the fighter, not just to follow what they said, but he's responsible, so he needs to know. The second thing is certainty. And now with the COVID test is even more. Clean, healthy. The third word is awareness. You have to be aware of what you're doing. And but the main thing of this program, and I'm really proud of being part of it, is fairness. So you know that you're fighting with someone that is as clean as you. So I just want to congratulate you for being to take this step. That it was really hard when you said in the beginning. I was in the meeting when Dr. Goodman was there also.
Yes.
And it seems like a dream. And it was going to be really impossible, but the fighters didn't take it that way. They understand, and they have been educated. So I just want to congratulate all for being part of this.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you,
Have a great
Mauricio.
one.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Be safe. Everyone stay healthy.